those hardships and tragedies in life, we're going to come up against them. And if children are to know that they're going to face those hardships, at least they'll see that there's a way to fight, a way to come through.
Welcome back to Weatherford Daze. Glad to have you with us. As you can see, we've had quite a few episodes on the channel, and we hope you enjoyed them. They're getting some traction, getting some people looking at them, and we hope that you're enjoying. And if you are, let us know. I'm Jason. This is Rachel. It's my wife.
Okay, so today we are going to just kind of dive in because it's a little bit of a more serious topic than we've done, and serious and big. It's a big topic. It's bigger than we know that we really can do justice to, but the topic is the darkness before dawn, dealing with sorrow, dealing with grief. And we wanted to kind of start off by saying that, we're not trained in grief counseling. We're just two normal people who have experienced what life has thrown at us. And that's, we've read books, experienced, the 42 and 47 years of life so far. And that's really what we have, the perspective that we're coming at this from. If you are in the midst of some serious stuff right now, we're gonna just encourage you to seek out people, seek out resources, seek out, whether that be a therapist, whether it be a counselor, whether it be a pastor, someone that has been trained. When we were talking before we started, we were just kind of mulling over how a lot of the times when people have experienced hardship or loss, specifically loss, sorrow, the first instinct that we have is to kind of isolate. We go to ourselves, and we were saying that, we think that that's kind of a coping mechanism and a protection instinct that we have.
Yeah, that's good.
That because sometimes the most well-intentioned people can hurt us even worse. And when we're already hurting, that's the last thing that we need. So, protect yourself from that well-intentions, but at the same time, don't isolate. We humans were not meant to go this road alone.
Yes.
And
I was actually going to say yes.
Yeah. So find people that will speak to you. Find music. Turn to the Bible. If that's your belief, find some place that you can go for healing. Don't stay stagnant. Another thing that we were kind of going through was that, we have you've heard the saying that time heals all wounds, but if you don't use your time intentionally to heal, then that may not be true. Yeah. It takes you actually trying, you actually going, you know what, I want to get through this. I want to heal. I want to come out the other side somehow to be able to ever get there. But at the same time, it's okay to hurt for however long you need to. It's okay to feel that. You're allowed to live that. And nobody gets to tell you, hey, it's time. Yeah. It's time for you to heal now. You need to be over that. That's yours to decide. How long you want to hurt, how long you want to feel, how long you want to grieve. And it's yours to decide when it's time to seek healing. to seek peace, to seek joy, because it is there. And that's the hope that there is healing on the other side of pain.
I don't think that grief is a bad word. I think sometimes when we get upset or angry, no one ever comes to us and says, don't be angry. It's what you do with it. It's does it cause you to, can you talk to somebody about that anger without lashing out and acting out? Yeah, and work through it in a positive way, but also it is your emotion, and it is a feeling that you have, and what you do with it is the important thing. Just like that with grief is not a bad word. It's not, in my mind, an obstacle to overcome. It's not the grief that's the obstacle. It's how it affects you and how it affects your surroundings, and what do you do with that? Instead of looking at it as, well, you see, they said get over. What do you do with an obstacle? Is you get over it, or you get through. It's something you pass through. Oh, and I've passed through it, so it's gone. I think I'll bring up some quotes that I had later about this, but what does it do to you? What does it do for you to feel those feelings? And you can still and it's not a grief on one side and joy on the other. And if you don't have don't have the grief anymore, now that I have joy, did you integrate it with you? Did you integrate it into your life? Can you feel both at the same time? And are you doing that in a healthy way? Is it, I know we were talking about earlier about a godly sorrow. I know it's about repentance, but it did say that sorrow does happen. I mean, even Jesus, felt it. It's not something that it's what it was for, and what did it accomplish?
It's in Isaiah, isn't it, that it says that he's a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief?
Yeah.
That was
in
one of his titles.
53, 52, 53. Yeah.
With that introduction, then we'll go ahead and talk about the reason why I wanted to do this now is because, along with the idea of heroes and villains and love and all of the things that we've covered so far, one of the biggest themes that you will find, especially in fiction books, is, which that's probably the majority of books, isn't it? But anyway, is that all of these heroes have to experience something just tragic, typically. That is what the story centers around, right? And how they handle that, what they do, how they get through, is the majority of the story. So it's really not something that we cannot talk about. We've touched on it a little bit in our introduction, but it's a big theme, and it pops up sometimes in the most unlikely of books. The book that I was reading this past week that I just finished was another fantasy book involved with the Fae. Y'all are gonna think I'm so one note now. This is Bride of the Fae Prince. It's by Anastasis Blythe. It's a interesting name. I've never seen that name before.
I've seen Anastasia's.
Yeah, but it's Anastasis. A-N-A. I don't need to spell it.
No.
We'll put it up on the screen. Anastasis Blythe. So actually, rather than reading the synopsis of it, it's
like the blurb.
Yeah, it's your kind of typical, a princess of the humans ends up engaged to a prince of the Fae, and she has to save all of humanity against an invasion by the Fae.
Typical Saturday night for most everybody. Yeah,
it is kind of one of those tropes. It was that Tuesday is for very me, right? No. Common in Fae novels, and you've got the typical Fae cruelty and trickery and just being kind of so overwhelmingly more powerful than the humans that it takes an exceptional human to be able to do anything.
Is there any courtly intrigue that you find
Oh,
with a
there's
lot of the
courtly
Fae stuff, where
intrigue.
you have this duke and this prince and this duchess and of of the leaves or whatever they're doing these machinations and stuff, and
It is
yeah.
interesting, though, from a psychology standpoint. This book is one of those that the princess has been raised by her father to have the mindset that your entire purpose in being as a princess is to make a good match, one that benefits the kingdom. The thought is that she would be married to a human, regardless of whether, princesses weren't allowed love, right? That seems to be a pretty common thing among fiction as well, is that the princess is always going to be in a political marriage. Her main purpose is to bring stability or wealth or connections of some kind to the kingdom. So that, is the mindset. Again, a lot of just psychological manipulation and abuse and things that people like to work through in this fantasy trope is the whole mindset of you only have one purpose, and that's to get married, and then you fulfilled your purpose, and whatever you do with the rest of your life, it doesn't matter. And the fact that the princess actually has to find meaning and purpose for her life outside of that. But anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. The
Sounds rough.
the thing is that the prince of the fae and the princess realize that the prince wants to overthrow his father, the king, and he knows that he is putting everything on the line, that he very well may fail. He's facing, he's fallen in love with his human princess, and she wants to help him, but he is scared. He has been faced with his entire life. His father has anybody that he cared about, anybody that had any meaning to him, his father would use them against him to try and control him. So he's got the villain tyrant father that needs to be overthrown. He's trying to do it. He's trying to save the humans. He's trying to save the people that he loves, but he's also trained himself not to show that he cares about anybody. And so he's trying to work through that. There's a lot of emotional processing and stuff throughout this, but towards the end, when it's all coming together, he is faced with the the he's faced with the dilemma of, am I willing to risk everything, not just my life but the life of the woman that I love, in order to do what's right? And not only, he's looking at the reality of he's could lose this human. There's not a way for him to continue on and to protect her at the same time. He's just tried to send her away. She's like, no, you need me. So she's determined that she's going to help. But they have this conversation, and he says, but what if something goes wrong and I lose you? What if I cannot protect you from all who wish you harm? What then? In either case, how do we, or I, keep on living? You are my life, so how could I live without you? So she's thinking, how can you go on living after tragedy? Her response is, living with my family was very stressful. Marrying you was terrifying. It would have been easier in that moment to not have married you. I would have chosen that if I'd had a choice. But marrying you was the best thing I'd ever done. I discovered what it was to be loved. Even if this ends horribly, I will have no regrets. I would always choose to have weeks as your bride instead of decades as the wife of someone like Prince Brockville. You don't mean that, he murmurs. I think you need to stop believing that I would have been better off if you'd never entered my life, I reply firmly, because it's not true. Do you remember who I was when you first met me? Do you remember how I could barely talk, much less about my own thoughts and ideas? Do you remember how I struggled to look you in the eye? When you showed up at my father's doorstep, I was living a miserable life. Isabel Louise never could have done the things I did today and yesterday. She was too afraid. I'm better for having known you, Ash. Can you believe that? For me. Then I whisper to him, I think sometimes life takes us through dark times to get to the good times, the better times. And the goodness is so much sweeter for the hardship we endure. It doesn't make me any less afraid of the darkness. No, and when we're in the depths of it, it's hard to believe we will come out of it. But I tell you this so that if the darkness comes, part of you can remember and believe. Because I know, Ash, I believe with all my soul that there is always, always happiness on the other side of heartbreak. If darkness comes, Ash growls, then I will remember and I will curse this memory, this moment, even as I treasure it. But if I ever did find happiness again, then maybe I will find my faith once more, and I will know that you were right, as you always are.
I can see why you picked that particular quote, or how that ties back into what you were talking about. We're talking about the darkness, and getting through it to the other side of light. It's not that, not getting through it, but seeing that light at the end, at the end of that process.
It's one of those, this is only one of many examples I could have pulled from fiction. It's one of the reasons why I love fiction so much, is because you get to see and you get to understand. You sink into the mind of someone who's experiencing something so hard, and you're seeing how they process and how they deal with that hardship. And I feel like a lot of times, I don't know if that's the best thing when you're in the middle of hardship, but if you're before it, if you're learning, if you're preparing for life, then it can give you the steps. You can have them in place already for how to respond to grief, how to respond to tragedy before you actually get there. It's kind of one of those that you already have kind of the template for a response and for, what your mindset is going to be before you even face it. I think that, another thing that I was thinking about was C.S. Lewis's quote. I actually pulled it up. It says, since it's so likely that children will meet cruel enemies, let them at least have heard of brave knights and heroic courage. Otherwise, you are making their destiny not brighter, but darker. So I think, he was talking about his decision to include dragons in his books and, such terrifying situations and that children would be exposed to. And he's going, we're all going to face those hardships and tragedies in life. We're going to come up against them. And if children are to know that they're going to face those hardships, at least they'll see that there's a way to fight, a way to come through. And that has, I don't know, that just sunk in and resonated with me from a very early age. It's like, this is what fiction does. It gives us kind of a pathway that we're not facing our own stuff. We're not having to deal with our own situations. We're not having to deal with reality because, yeah, that's way harder. But we're seeing this fiction and we're seeing how they are coping and how they're handling. And it makes us stronger. It makes us braver to face our own things, I think. Or it can if we let it.
I tend to be that guy to kind of go to urge caution, because I'm always doing that with different situations at work or whatever. I go, now be careful. But in the case of what Rachel's talking about, be careful with the fiction that you do open yourself up to, because those authors aren't thinking about how this is going to affect your journey, your possible journey through a dark time. And they're just trying to tell a story that they need to tell. And that story may take a dark turn in and of itself, because they're not trying to give you tips on how to deal. They're just telling you what happened. And if that story might glorify some solutions to that darkness that are not healthy, it I just caution you to be careful, because fiction
There's
can
some
help
bad ones
us.
out there.
Yeah, I would suggest that you have in your life. It may not be somebody that you deal with on a day-to-day basis, but like a fiction partner, somebody who has read it, won't spoil it for you, but knowing you can kind of go, and caution you a little bit on that. I don't know, somebody, if you have a website that you really like that talks about that. Anyway, I was just give you a little caution. If you are talking to somebody that's going through something like that, I would urge you to do more listening than talking, and do more with making that person feel safe than judged for how they're feeling. Because sometimes they might work through it, but they may say some things that, they're dealing with those things, and sometimes those things have to come out into the open. And if they're able to say those things with you and still feel safe, it means that they trust you. They can be vulnerable with you, and that means you're a special person to them. And remember to be careful with someone's feelings, because when they expose themselves and be vulnerable, that you take care not to hurt those places in their life. That's just a little advice. But yes, I can tell you right now that not all the dark times that I've read about or watched in a movie were things that I deal with on a day-to-day basis in my life. Sometimes they're battles against a foe or an enemy. And, it feels like the darkest moment, and those times when you can see victory coming, and you can see that the heroes are just under it. And that moment when we can do this, that one moment, as it were, it brings tears to my eyes just thinking about some of those moments. But the foes we face every day aren't, some not a real, but say an intergalactic warlord. They're not, that kind of foe. Sometimes I'm dealing with stuff in my job, or I'm dealing with, wrestling with thoughts, things that I'm dealing with, or how I relate to my wife and family or my friends. Am I reflecting, Christ the way I should? Those are all things that you struggle with on a day-to-day basis, and it's not as as big as those fantasy books and those foes in the fantasy book, but it's
sometimes it's the consequences of our own decisions.
yeah, they are. But it takes a real reflective mind to be able to look at yourself in the mirror and kind of go, maybe the change that I'm looking for, I need to find. I need to be the source of that. But those are the foes we face every day, and those are the darknesses that come in life. Some of our own choices, and some of our own making, and some not.
There's a difference between fighting a foe and dealing with tragedy. Okay? And you fight the foes a lot of times before you face the tragedy. And like the tragedy is the consequences of having faced the foe, and what the fallout is from that. It's the dealing with it afterwards. Another one that you look at, my absolute favorite book series is The Lord of the Rings. And you look at, Frodo had to deal with so much. All of the fellowship, all of the, people that were included in that book had to deal with so much. And I love the fact that the book doesn't just end at the battle is won. It actually takes and deals with each person going and picking up the pieces afterwards and how they carry on. Aragorn probably gets, the best thing, right? He becomes the king of Gondor. He gets to finally marry Arwen, who he's been waiting for decades to be able to marry. You have Legolas and Gimli who travel together. They, seem to have a great time. You've got all of the other hobbits who go back, and after they clean out the Shire and fix things, then they all become put into positions of prominence. The Pippin becomes the mayor, right? Or was it Mary? I think it's Pippin.
Yeah, I think so.
Mary also has, a pretty good position. You've got
Samwise.
He gets to marry Rosie Cotton, who, that was his big goal, was to get to marry her, and he has children. And for a time, Frodo is there, and he tries to get back into the daily life. He picks back up. He gets back to his hobbit hole, his home.
His routine, maybe.
He finishes his writing Bilbo's book, but he's never okay again. And, for him, the story doesn't end with him just picking back up and living the rest of his life happily ever after, because he defeated the bad guy. He did the ultimate, he was the one with the ultimate quest, the ultimate responsibility on his shoulders. He got the ring to the cracks of doom and he threw it in, but he lost a piece of himself in the process, not just the figure or the finger.
Not just,
Yeah.
metaphorically in his soul.
But yeah, he lost his ability to ever be at peace in Middle Earth again. And that's something that, he ends up actually, along with Bilbo, going to the ships and going across the sea and, never to see Middle Earth again. His place of peace was that was the way that was the elf's sense of heaven, right? Was that, that was
with the Valinor, yeah.
right. And so he left, and, you only hope that he found peace, that he found a place of such beauty and such rest that he was able to finally lay down that burden that he had carried. It's such a kind of a heartbreaking story, but I think that kind of deals with the reality that some people in life do seem like there's too much pain that they've borne to ever truly be at peace here. And, for Christians, that's one of the things that we see such a beauty in the reality that heaven is waiting, and that's where the true healing and the true peace is going to come from, is that eternity is not here. It's not in this flesh. It's not in this sinful, broken world. It's that we have this place promised to us where it's been said that, there will be no more pain, no more sorrow, no more sickness, no more sadness, and he will wipe away every tear from our eyes. you guys realize that we're going to bring all of everything that we've experienced here in life? It's not like our memories are just gone when we get to heaven. It's that he actually takes and says, healing is now with me, and I will wipe away your tears. The tears are happening there in heaven, but he wipes them away for us. Like, is there anything more beautiful or more full of hope for us here than that knowledge that when we finish this life, when we finally rest in the arms of our Savior, that he is going to wipe away every tear, and that we will have peace from the Prince of Peace?
I think that there are some positives that can come from you've heard people say, oh, you need a cry, you need a good cry, it's a cleansing cry. There's a truth to that. I lost my dad years ago, and I've worked through a lot of stuff, but sometimes it comes back. Just that I wish that my dad could see different things that are happening, or I could experience that with him seeing that. It's been the last year, I think, that I saw, or that I've been, I'm on YouTube a lot, and I saw an interview that the actor Andrew Garfield had about his mom who had died of pancreatic cancer. And he also, strangely enough, he actually was on Sesame Street one time. He was talking to Elmo about grief. And I don't know how anybody in that entire, people running the cameras are just like, crying. But the quote that really helped me, that made me see some really good things about that. I want to just give you some of those real quick. During an interview that he did on The Late Show, he says, I love talking about her, by the way. So if I cry, it's only a beautiful thing. This is all the unexpressed love, the grief that will remain with us until we pass, because we never get enough time with each other, no matter if someone lives until 60, 15, or 99. He says he hopes that it stays with him because of it's when you feel that sorrow, it's that the grief is all the unexpressed love that you feel, and it comes out it expresses in that way. And I felt that was a real positive way of looking at that, because people are just like, hey, it's okay, don't cry. But like I said before, it's what you do with it. If there's a godly sorrow that leads to repentance, well, there's a sorrow that can have a healing to it. And it's what you do with that. You could turn it inwards, and you could become closed off from others. You could say, well, I'm never going to invest my emotion in anyone again. They just leave me. They just go. They're just gone. But that's no way to live. We're meant to live in community with one another, with communion with one another. Don't neglect that. Don't leave that because of the grief you're feeling. Let it wash you. Let there come some positivity from that. But when we are on the other side, it will be joy, tears of joy, because everyone that we've ever been separated from, there's no more separation. So sorry, go ahead.
I was just thinking about that grief can bring us to a point of where we're living in bitterness, and where we're no longer capable of loving, of giving love.
Yeah.
So it's not even that
Self-protection.
Yeah, it's not even that we don't have joy anymore, it's that we don't have love. And I think that one of the things that, knowing that we're created in God's image, And that the defining characteristic of God is that He is love, is that we are beings who were created to love, to just be constantly pouring out love towards other people. I think that's one of the biggest ways that we reflect being image bearers of God is that love. And when we dwell in sorrow for so long that we let it turn to bitterness, that's the thing that gets taken away, is our ability then to pour out love to other people, because it becomes all about us and about what we've experienced rather than about what we can give.
It goes both ways. Allow
Mm-hmm.
yourself to let someone else in. Let
To
them
receive the love. Yeah.
love you back. It may seem easier to just go to love because I'm in control of that, my loving of other people. But you're also if you don't go both ways, you're leaving yourself at a distance. And I think that, like I said, love is a two-way street, two-way channel. And you may think that you're protecting yourself from pain, from ever being hurt again, but that's because you haven't had an integrative experience with what that pain is. If you have that pain and you see what it's working out can do, even Jesus was not spared pain. But what did he do with it? We talked about it in the heroes and villains episode. We talked about, said no one's ever going to hurt like that again. Well, here's the thing: you can't prevent everyone's hurt, but what you can do is be there with them and be alongside them. Because I think that when you think that you're alone, you isolate, and when you have someone else that are going through it with you and just there, they may not have to say anything. They're just there. Sometimes that's all we need. Sometimes we need a Samwise to carry us. And sometimes we just need somebody just to sit with us and listen.
There's a faith that goes, that carries us on even when we've lost hope. And hope is so essential for humans. Hope that there is something better, that there is happiness on the other side. But there's times when we all lose that hope, and it's faith in, I mean, for me, I think it's knowing the reality of the fact that there is a God, and that if there is a God who created this world and us humans, because to me it's unfathomable that this world could exist without God, then the next step is that this God has revealed himself to us through the Bible, and he's revealed himself to be a good God. He's revealed himself to be a God who loves. And that even though there is brokenness and there's tragedy in the world, that he has so much more for us than we see now. That he has that hope, that he has that healing, that he has that joy, that there will be rest. Because we're not living in the light of the finite, we're living in an infinite, in the light of the eternal. And with that knowledge, that we can know and understand the character of God, we have the faith that he is who he says he is, that he will do what he says he will do, and that we can trust him. That even if things don't change in our personal circumstances, that we can still trust him. To have such such a bigger plan than we're able to see, and that plan is for our good. And with that faith in the goodness and the knowledge of who God is, we can deal with anything, I think.
You know what I thought of one thing, well, a couple things. The first one was take my yoke upon you, for my burden is light. And I think the reason why is because he's carrying most of it. And the thing is, we tend to think that we have to carry all that. I can't speak for, the female perspective, but being a man, sometimes I think I have to carry all that for my family, or I have to carry my own struggles or my own things and bear that alone. And when Jesus ascended to the Father, he left mankind something else to keep us going, and that was the Comforter, the Holy Spirit. I love that that's the name. There's like, oh, Father, and there's a Father. Oh, and there's a Son, but there's a Comforter. It's really the descriptor is so rich there, because he wasn't there. I'm not there. Christ is not there to touch you physically, but he's like, you know what? My Spirit will go with you. And think about how many more people he could comfort and touch when he can do it through the Spirit. So you're not lonely. You don't have to be alone. You're not alone. You have the Comforter. You have, even though you can't see, there's something beyond your sight that is there for you. You'll just let it.
I think I do want to say that if there's anything that you would like us to pray for, we would gladly do that. I know that going into this episode, I have been praying for the past several days, just that at the very least, that nothing that we would say today would cause more hurt for someone, but that we would be another just place of comfort and hope towards people that are either in it or will be in it, because that's something that it's a common human experience, that we're all going to experience some kind of grief or pain at some point in our lives. If you haven't yet, you will. But there is light on the other side of that darkness. There is hope. There is joy. And there are so many people in this world who care about you, who love you, who are praying for you, who want to be there for you. And they're not going to do it perfectly. They're going to mess up. They're going to say the wrong thing. They're going to do the wrong thing. But if you stick with them, give them chances, communicate, and give grace to yourself and to the human beings that you're surrounded with, because we're all broken. You'll get through it. They'll get through it.
It's good. And, the things we've talked about tonight are not going to encompass everyone's experience. So we ask that you give us a little bit of grace, and we'll give you some grace back too. And with that, I've been Jason. This is Rachel, and we're Weatherford Daze. Thanks for spending your days with us, and find that light.